It's a stickleback. My name is Nicole Rasmussen. I am the Quileute tribe's natural resource water quality biologist. We have a beautiful reservation here in La Push, and we had huge potholes that were causing water quality degradation. We had culvert barriers that were half broken off in the road or rusting out, that fish were being blocked. And we could improve the road with all the funding, address the aquatic fish passage issues, the water quality degradation, and it really helped the Quileute tribe.
We have the new road that was put in, some new culverts, and I could see little fish already swimming in there, so immediately they started coming back. My name is Tony Foster. I am Vice Chairman for the Quileute tribe, and I'm also Chief Fish and Wildlife Enforcement for the Quileute tribe. It's a way of life for us. Every fish matters, you know, for the Quileute people. We need to also preserve what we have for future generations to come.
This project is really born out of passion. My name is Rachel Maggi. I am the Natural Resources Conservation Service West Area Biologist. NRCS's assistance through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program on improving fish habitat and salmon recovery really fills a gap in the larger watershed approach to salmon recovery. Private and tribal lands are one piece of the natural resources ownership in our state, and we're able to partner with tribes, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife.
We provide some technical assistance and outreach. My name is Melissa Urkel, and I'm a fish passage and salmon restoration biologist. And for this project specifically, kind of aligned with the vision that everyone had for fish passage. So fish would be able to access that upstream habitat year-round.
The mission of NRCS, helping people help the land, that is exactly what we're doing with the Quileute tribe. I'm Robin Slate, and I'm the State Tribal Liaison for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Access for the community to help a tribe maintain their cultural ties.
This was an ideal restoration project for the tribe to take on.
And it really is going to take us all working together to be able to improve salmon habitat from the ocean to the crest of the Cascades and beyond.
It's worth it.
This is home for all of us. This is where we belong.
In Washington State, shellfish are a way of life, in our past, in our present, and our future.
This is my quiet place. I come out here and I can work and I can think about our ancestors, and they dug clams and off of this beach.
Me gusta mucho mi trabajo y lo hago con mucho cariño, con mucho amor.
Tribes, multi-generational shellfish farms, and relative newcomers harvest oysters, mussels, gooey duck, and other shellfish, providing jobs in some of Washington's most rural communities, healthy food, and connection to the marine environment. Demand for seafood is on the rise. So how can shellfish aquaculture meet this demand in the most sustainable way? Key to answering this question is knowing more about how shellfish aquaculture works in the marine environment. And to do this, we need to see beneath. Shellfish growers throughout Puget Sound have partnered with NOAA, Sea Grant, and the Nature Conservancy to understand more about how shellfish aquaculture functions in the marine environment.
The traditions and culture of Jamestown have always been about the sea. Ever since the people were here, this is what they've been doing, this is what they've been eating. And we've always wondered what was going on around the aquaculture program, around those oyster beds. And so we're happy to be in a collaborative effort to see what's going on.
We have a good sense of what's happening out there at low tide. You know, you can walk out, pick up a cluster, and see lots of things. We don't know what's happening at all at high tide, so it's really awesome to have the cameras out there so that we can get a better sense of how these animals are using the gear at high tide.
Documenting with GoPros will help other people understand how diverse and how dynamic our beaches are.
Having good science is so important. What we find the best way to get results is through collaboration and building relationships.
Having people like shellfish producers on the ground every day, they see things, they experience things, they understand and can observe long-term trends. Where researchers are really great about understanding larger concepts and trying to apply them locally, but without that partnership and that synergy, they might not be able to realize the research that they'd like to do on a farm.
In this project, growers and researchers deploy cameras on shellfish beds. We set cameras in different types of growing areas and in unfarmed habitat. The cameras record at high tide. We then collect them, review video, and quantify fish and crab use of the sites. With these data, we can know more about the value of habitat created by shellfish farms relative to other habitats.
These kind of cooperative efforts are what we really love about being shellfish farmers.
With GoPro cameras and the new technology, this has opened a door to allow us to collect data that we wouldn't have been able to collect even a couple years ago.
So demand for seafood is certainly on the rise. And the question for us at the Nature Conservancy and elsewhere is, how does shellfish aquaculture fit into the puzzle? What's great about this project is that by getting a better look below, we can be smarter when we look ahead in Washington and beyond.
From the timberlands, from the forest on down to the ocean. The land that we live on doesn't necessarily always belong to one entity. It's a shared resource. Winter Lake is a great example of a restoration project on a large scale. What it's showing is that you can work the land, but you can also protect our natural resources.
This is a project that has specific features designed to help the agriculture community irrigate their pastures, where the ranchers will have better opportunity to raise cattle that have better gain per day. And yet in the winter, when we don't normally graze cattle out here much, we'll have an opportunity to produce more fish and waterfowl out here for the community.
Our culvert tide gates behind me here are the meat and potatoes of this project. I've been around tide gates my entire life, and forever it was keep the water out, keep the water out. And there was no fish passage. That habitat out there in the wintertime is very productive for the fish. So we really needed to figure out how to get the fish in here in the wintertime, and that didn't take anything away from the grazing operations. We've got the capability here now. Not only can we let water in, but we can also get rid of a lot of water in a hurry too. Our motto has been, or is that we grow beef in the summer and fish in the winter.
Historically, floodplain habitats had channel networks that were created by thousands of years of tidal action, but since it's so flat, there's not a lot of power, if you will. There's not a lot of slope, and so you have to create them if they've been eliminated. The tide gates will let them in. They'll be able to live in the channels where they can feed in here until the floodwaters come. And then when the water gets about a foot to 18 inches on the field, they feel safe and they can move out on the adjacent floodplain pastures.
People are like, oh, why do you ranch, whatever? And I just tell them, it's in my blood. It's just part of me. It is who I am. Here, if we can graze it and have ducks, geese, and all the wildlife, and then the fish, and the cattle all working alongside each other, that'd be the ultimate, I think.
The ecosystem evolved with grazing animals. Wild grazing animals can be a huge problem and a big detriment to the ecosystem. If we're going to have really healthy systems, then they have to be a component of that, and they need to be managed right. Just like the bulldozers out here can be used to create all kinds of problems in wetlands, we're also using them to restore wetlands, and the same can be said for the cattle.
I found in my life that going for a walk outside, hearing the birds is kind of the best medicine one can have, and so I wanted to kind of build a life connected and sort of structured around that. And I want all of our children to have the opportunity to be every day intimately connected with nature.
So there could have been as many as 412,000 coho returning to the Coquille on a big year. Growth rates for coho in wetlands are almost twice, sometimes 3 times the rate of fish living in forest and stream network habitats. In some of this, you're going to see wetland forest in 40 years.
So we're at Beaver Slough. Beaver Slough flows into the Coquille River just downstream of where the Winter Lake project site is. Beaver Slough is a perfect example of an area that, because of how wild it is, because of the habitat type we have here, because of the diversity of trees and shrubs, this is what we want a lot of other areas to look like. So our channels, when we're done digging in Winter Lake, will have a lot of overhanging vegetation like you're seeing all around me. We're not doing restoration for single species. We're looking at stacking benefits, and not just stacking benefits for nature, we're also stacking benefits for people. And in this case, we're stacking cultural benefits for people that have lived on this landscape for thousands and thousands of years.
We all had to agree that the science said this would make more fish. It's important that success for this is that the Oregonians become connected, Northern Californians, perhaps people from all the Pacific Northwest recognize that it's an important area to see how wild ecological function is not only helping fish and wildlife populations, but helping the economy of Coos County and the state of Oregon.
It wouldn't be fair to say that it's always been easy. It's really rewarding to look at it now and see the potential that it's got, and quite frankly, the potential that we're seeing here far exceeds, I think, anything we thought possible.
From ranchers and farmers to the Coquille Indian tribe, we all use that land in different ways, but we all call it our own.
Literally, the beach was my front yard for years. I lived on Toledo on the beach, and instead of grass, we had sand, and it was amazing. But this is a resource that is truly in trouble.
The initiative was basically a federal program that was formed back in 1998. It's a framework for allowing marine conservation and education and restoration efforts to be passed down to the local county organizations or the county governments.
So today we're working on the restoration at Bowman Bay, which is part of Deception Pass Park. We've been working to restore the beach back to natural conditions. We've removed over 500 feet of shoreline armoring. There was big rocks all along the shoreline that were put there to protect a fish hatchery. So we've removed all of that, and now we've also graded the beach and brought in sediment that is the perfect size for forage fish like surf smelt and sand lance that use the beach to spawn. Following the restoration, we've been working really hard to reestablish the vegetation along the shoreline, which creates the connection between the marine waters and the upland habitat. I would just always encourage people to come out to the beaches, first touch the water, turn over a rock, see what's going on, and really engage in the habitat and become a part of it.
For a time, I was a biologist on commercial fishing boats, and so I saw firsthand the impacts of derelict fishing gear. A lot of nets in the water, a lot of pots in the water, a lot of marine traffic has caused this accumulation of a lot of debris. We've removed over 5,700 derelict nets in Puget Sound. We've removed over 5,000 crab pots in Puget Sound. The removal of that has restored over 830 acres of marine habitat, and the amount of marine organisms that we're saving that aren't getting tangled up with the deer, those are in the thousands of what's getting saved every year. We're kind of moving our direct efforts towards the crab pot issue. There's an estimated 12,000 crab pots that are lost in Puget Sound every year, and it's not something you can stay on top of just by removals. Most of the reasons for these crab pots being lost can be prevented. The big thing is changing behavior. Having a properly weighted pot would be the number one.
The success of the initiative is grounded in the work that is conducted by volunteer groups and citizen scientists. And the data they collect is used by state agencies and other resource management groups to guide management decisions that will benefit the resource in the long run.
Every year here on Whidbey Island, we send our volunteers out for 1 hour per week during the summer months to sit on the beach and observe the guillemots. We're looking for changes in population. We are also identifying the number of active burrows, and we're delighted that over those 12 years we have found a very consistent population of 1,000 birds, which is good news for the birds, and also provides a baseline for any potential changes that may come to the Salish Sea in the years to come.
Whatever the impacts are that we're facing, it took all of us to get us in this condition, and no single entity or organization is going to get us out. It's going to take all of us. People's own activities on the landscape or marine waters have to change, and how we change is going to be the benefits that we'll see in the future.
Beaches in general they're built by storms. Sometimes they may come in, they may erode a beach away. Some places they may rebuild the beach. The beach can respond. It can sort of adjust accordingly to the amount of energy and the kind of energy that's coming in. As a geologist here in Puget Sound, one of my concerns is that armoring is intended to stop erosion. And I completely understand the motivation to do that, but that erosion is also what's maintaining our beaches over time. When we normally think of going to the beach or having a picnic on the beach, we often are thinking of the drift logs, the beach grass, that area. That's the area that usually is gone once you've armored a beach.
You could not really walk down to the edge of the bulkhead, and so most people just chose not to go down there. It was kind of getting to be an eyesore. It's like these old rotting creosote pilings.
We've seen a lot of public projects, a lot of parks projects where an old bulkhead, they were thinking about repairing it, but they decided that instead of repairing it, they just pull it out.
The construction company was really awesome. Felt like they knew what they were doing, just trying to shake these old creosote pilings out of where they'd been for so many years. And then the rock removal. There was a lot of debris. All the concrete had to be removed.
People come back later, and a lot of the visitors come back and say, wow, this is much better than it was before.
People felt like the determination to do this project was for the good of the community.
The overall rates of erosion here on Puget Sound are not all that rapid. Very few homes are in direct threat. And so you don't have to build a structure. Some people just really like to have a natural shoreline.
You'll get more aesthetic benefits, and you'll have wildlife that'll enjoy that rather than a concrete bulkhead you have to look at. When it did flood, it was somebody else's bulkhead that blew out. And so I said, well, why should we change? This is doing a great job for us.
Wood's very common in our system. It's just a natural part of our system. There's a lot of wood. It's true in our rivers and streams. It's true out on our coast.
They do it kind of naturally. I mean, these logs aren't placed by me. It's the way they are, and they kind of lock on each other. So it's pretty nice that way.
We know that wood creates sort of what biologists call complexity to the shoreline. And as a result, it has a lot of interesting ecological effects on the system itself.
Even if they go away, more come back. So we sort of add protection every year without really doing anything.
Here in the Sound, you've got this transition, this very rapid transition from forest, upland forest, to marine conditions. You can just see the beach threading its way along the coastline. You've got the forest on one side. You go a little bit offshore here and you're in 200 feet of water. So you got a lot of variability within that narrow band. And it's a very important band ecologically. That's the area that usually is gone once you've armored a beach. And so you see this sort of interlocking of the marine and the terrestrial systems. That's where these systems really sort of are richest, is where they come together like that. Even though this looks really dry and sterile, if you dig underneath, it gets really wet and holds moisture. And if you know what you're looking for, you can start to find a lot of stuff living in the beach that you wouldn't expect just looking at the surface. The traditional methods have a lot of impacts associated with them. And some people are just thinking, well, you know, I want to do the right thing on the shoreline.
The benefit is just the aesthetic part and the protection without having to go to big extremes.
Really kind of felt like this could be our part in making Puget Sound healthier.
If we can avoid building structures, if we can allow erosion to occur, we have a way of maintaining our beaches into the future.
This is the beach at Bowman Bay in Washington's Deception Pass State Park. Nestled between rocky outcrops, this pocket beach is home to salmon and bull trout, marine birds, crabs, and a host of other animals and plants that typify the Pacific Northwest. In 2015, the Northwest Straits Foundation and Skagit Marine Resources Committee partnered with Washington State Parks to restore shoreline habitat and improve beach access at Bowman Bay. The shoreline of Bowman Bay was heavily modified in the 1940s to build a fish hatchery. Wetlands were filled and the shoreline was armored with large rocks called riprap. All of this change affected the biology of the bay, and the riprap covered up important beach habitat for small fish like Pacific sandlance and surf smelt, who lay their eggs on beaches during high tide. The riprap also made it difficult for park visitors to get to the water's edge. We removed 2,000 tons of riprap over 540 feet of shoreline, restoring over half an acre of nearshore habitat. After the rocks were removed, we regraded the beach and added sand and gravel. This sand and gravel mix is really important because it provides the specific kind of sediment needed for the fish to lay eggs on the beach. The eggs stay in the beach sediment until the fish hatch and are then swept out to sea with the tides. We also planted about half an acre of the upland and shoreline with native dune grasses and other plants. These plants will help stabilize the beach sediment and provide shade to the beach. Eventually, insects will inhabit all of this vegetation and supply food to juvenile salmon, who hang out in the shallow water until they grow large enough to head out to sea. Another benefit of this project is how much safer and easier it is to reach the water, improving beach access for the thousands of people who visit the park each year. We were able to improve habitat for fish and wildlife, and at the same time, improve the experience for park visitors who want to enjoy this wonderful beach. For us at Northwest Straits, it just doesn't get any better than that.
I think all of us living in the Pacific Northwest recognize salmon as a symbol of tribal culture. It's a traditional food source as well as a cultural identity.
The Three Crabs Estuarine Restoration Project was a project near the mouth of the Dungeness River on a creek nearby called Meadowbrook Creek. And Meadowbrook Creek was in a pretty sorry state when the project started. It had been impacted by the county road that came through here, put through a bridge that was too small, and so we went in and restored that and made it function more like it should have been naturally.
The sand migration changed and we got this pattern where it started to scour the beach, and so the creek all of a sudden short-circuited straight out to the bay, and we started to have problems.
The restaurant had a great big riprap growing, and it was delaying the drift cell. Well, that caused a perceived flooding issue during some of the high tides because Meadowbrook was no match to keep pushing out. The club had Battelle do a model to see if there were options that could be done to alleviate that, and the model showed that it wasn't the mouth, the bridge was the problem.
Landscape scale conservation and restoration is a project of patience. It's a project of listening and figuring out what people's goals are and where they all converge, and grabbing onto that consolidated vision and driving and making it happen.
So this project, there was definitely times when it didn't feel like it was going to get off of the ground, and I'm seeing that in these large-scale restoration projects, it often seems like there's something that can make a project not go. So projects of this size run on powerful partnerships, I would say. In the end, the county owns the new roadway and they have right-of-way assigned over there. The conservation easement was adjusted to swap lands, and it was really the power of that collaborative nature with our partners that made it happen. An important part of the Three Crabs project was to actually remove the Dungeness Wharf. The Dungeness Wharf was a structure that ran off the end of the old road alignment. One reason the roadway was there is that it served this wharf. Well, that wharf had fallen into severe disrepair after over 100 years out in the salt water. It was a creosote timber structure. Turns out that that creosote is toxic. And because the wharf was in such terrible shape, it was included as part of a project element. So we mobilized in October of 2018 to take out the old Dungeness Wharf, which at the time all it really consisted of was about 170 standing piling, a little bit of superstructure, and we extracted that from the bay and hauled it off where it can live out the rest of its life, where it's not going to hurt anybody.
And there's some risk to not moving forward because there's an opportunity where if you don't take it with something like land acquisition, then that opportunity is gone for perhaps a long period of time. One of the things I'm most excited about with this project and the scale is the restoration of the tidal prism. And if we think of the tidal prism as the same as a person's lungs and sort of the ability to inhale and exhale, with this new exhalation, with the tidal prism restored, it's cleaning out a lot of that ulva, seaweed, and sort of detritus. The Dungeness River's role and importance in salmon recovery it's enormous. It's a river that has and continues to support all of our salmon species, the Chinook, coho, chum, pink, and steelhead. The richer that estuarine area is, the more resources they have, and literally the bigger they grow. And I would say, clap for those of us who came before you, because people did a lot of work to get it to look like this.
The Dungeness River mouth is an incredibly important place for birds because it's a migratory stopover. Before the restoration project really took place, the access at Three Crabs was difficult to get to because the parking was limited. After the restoration project, it opened up parking, obviously, but it also opened up the availability of shoreline to go out there and actually get a view of these birds that are migrating and stopping over. So there's been records since the 1920s of purple martin colonies, and a lot of the purple martin habitat has been removed, and so purple martins were disappearing from Clallam County. One of our partners, the Olympic Peninsula Audubon Society, took it upon themselves to add nesting colony places out at the old Three Crabs pilings and sees it as one of their biggest conservation successes. I think that after they looked through the whole thing and saw the reasoning behind removing the pilings, the end solution of actually having pilings erected that were both friendly to the environment but also met the needs of a purple martin nesting colony is a great example of cooperation between certain groups. Seeing the Dungeness River at the end be more fruitful for not only birds but for fish, and having that partnerships is probably the most exciting to me, to see a community kind of wrap around a project like this and have something great for everyone and the flora and fauna.
Almost every single person here had something to do with this project being a success. And so I invite you to give yourselves and your neighbors a round of applause for helping with this project. And another unexpected benefit of these projects and working so closely and so hard together is the building of community. And I really feel that today.
I first came out here in 1998 and I was working to identify tidal marsh restoration opportunities. And when I walked along Lower Marsh Creek, it was obvious to me that this was a relatively easy opportunity to restore a large area of tidal marsh. to benefit the fish and wildlife that historically have made their habitat in the Delta.
The Dutch Slough project is about 1,200 acres, and it used to all be contiguous. It used to all be one piece of landmass, and it was all tidal marsh, where the tides come in and then the tides go out. So it was a wetland. The soil was completely saturated. It was completely covered with tules and other emergent plants. Really rich. It was creating a lot of food for fish and birds and other kinds of wildlife that used to live here when it was a marsh. We used to have here in the Delta about 360,000 acres of tidal marsh. And we've only got about somewhere between 2 and 5% of that left, because around the turn of the 20th century, throughout the Delta, humans came and started building all these levees and isolating thousands and thousands of acres that were really productive and putting nutrients out into the main channels. We isolated those. So it basically shut the grocery stores for most of the animals. I mean, there just wasn't that much for them to eat anymore because these tidal marshes are so productive for the base of the food chain.
Our early vision for Dutch Slough was a habitat restoration project, but as we started working with local people, we realized that what people wanted is they wanted open space and recreational opportunity, they want clean water, and they want public safety. We don't have to just restore habitat and set it aside for nature, which I really believe in, but we can do it in a way that provides lots of benefits to humans.
When we breach the levees, and then we have this natural change in hydrology every day with the tide coming in and the tide coming out, it's going to introduce a lot of native small little animals, the little single-celled animals that nobody ever sees, and then clams and all big insects and all kinds of things that live in the water will come in, and then they'll populate our tule marsh. And then the fish will also come in. So the fish will come in with the tides. We have a run of salmon here in Marsh Creek. So they go up Marsh Creek and they spawn, and then the little salmon come down Marsh Creek on their way out to the ocean. So we're going to route Marsh Creek through the middle of this parcel. So we will have these baby salmon coming in here, and hopefully they will see this as a really great neighborhood to sort of grow up in, because it's going to provide everything that they need. They need the same things that we humans need. They need enough food to eat, and they want a safe place to live and grow up to be big fish instead of being eaten by bigger fish.
The physical design of the Dutch Slough project is actually a controlled scientific experiment so that we can learn not only whether the project worked, but why it worked.
The Dutch Slough project was definitely designed to help us learn about restoration in the Delta. What's the best for fish? What's the best way to design the channels? What are the best elevations? Is it really as valuable to young fish as we hope that it will be? So we're going to study all of those things. And then all of that knowledge that we gain here will be used elsewhere for future restoration so that we can do better designs to get better ecological results. We call this a living laboratory because it's going to be a place for people to do experiments, and the knowledge that comes from that will help make future restoration projects more cost-effective and more ecologically valuable.
The Yellow Flyaway Farms project site is located in the Cache Slough complex, and compared to other tidal marsh restoration projects, it's at what I would call a Goldilocks elevation, so it's not too low and it's not too high, and much of the existing grade that's out here is already at almost a perfect elevation for restoring tidal marsh habitat in this part of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So the amount of earthwork that has to take place out here compared to other sites or other tidal marsh restoration projects is a lot less. So we get a lot of bang for our buck.
One of the ways that this particular project is going to work is that we're going to open up a breach in this area to tidally connect to the tow drain, and we're going to create more wetlands on this property that's going to allow greater ability for food to grow on the site and create some of those little critters that the fish are going to want to eat. Because it's connected tidally, water's going to slosh in and out, and it's going to help export any of the food that's created on the site. It's going to wash out into the tow drain and connect to the food web through these channels that we're creating on the site. One of the best analogies for a wetland is that it functions as the kidneys in your body do. They take water on the site and they filter it out and they clean it. And then in this case, it also creates food and it flushes that down into the system. So the wetlands do a couple of different things that are really important for the overall system in the region of California.
The public-private partnership for the YOLO Flyaway Farms project was between the Department of Water Resources and private industry in order to deliver a fully executed tidal marsh restoration project to the department to help meet their mitigation needs in an efficient and an economically viable way.
This became a project between DWR and ourselves, partly governmental, partly private. We've done it very quickly and it's proven to be financially fine. Our investment is protected and sufficient to make it worthwhile doing another project, I hope, in the next few years.
So there are a couple of reasons why we're doing the tidal habitat restoration out here. One, we're legally required to provide 8,000 acres of tidal habitat for Delta smelts. That's required for the operation of the State Water Project, as well as the Central Valley Project. And then the other reason is just to provide a higher level of biodiversity for this region in an area that's been heavily degraded, heavily altered from its historic state. And so we want to try to bring back some of that biodiversity to this region.
The purpose of the expedition is to survey deep sea coral ecosystems in the Gulf of Mexico. We're about 150 nautical miles off St. Petersburg.
We're currently investigating areas under consideration for protection by the Fishery Management Council.
Odysseus is a science class system, and in this trip we're going to be supporting NOAA and their efforts to understand the habitat of the Florida shelf.
See, you need to go to the top down. See, that's what happens. See how the way you want it.
The thing that strikes me most about deep sea ecosystems is how little we know about the largest ecosystem on this planet.
You look out at the ocean and it's flat and it goes on for miles and you have absolutely no idea what's down there.
Go another 50 meters at 300.
The surface current was going this way, but the midwater current is going this way, perpendicular.
Very complex. We're trying to address everything that we can address in order to make this a successful and smooth operation.
Yes, you have permission to launch RV.
Roger that.
Scientists can think of it, we try to put it in and recover it. So we all work as a unit to keep it going.
We're going to locations that have never been explored.
Currently in 282 meters of depth, and we're mapping areas that have never been mapped before in detail.
Everybody has a specialty, like mine is fish. There's other people that are sponges, there's other people that are coral, so it takes a whole team of people to get the whole ecosystem view.
We combine efforts and we combine resources and we use each other's expertise and really learn about this ecosystem that we depend on.
Grab samples with the arm, and it's more exciting. I'm like twitching, oh, grab that, move that, put that in there.
We use DNA technology, the same that you use in, say, CSI Miami, DNA fingerprinting, the O.J. Simpson trial. We use that exact same technology, only we use it in deep water coral.
There are some species that have been dated to be several hundred to upwards of thousands of years old.
It's a lot of work. What might seem like a very little product, but at the end of the day, it's small things like that that we learn from and advance from.
The primary thing that we are trying to protect these corals from is damage from things like bottom trawling, deep sea mining. And the Deepwater Horizon was illustrative of moving into these deep waters can affect these deep sea ecosystems.
We
started about 12 days ago with no samples, and now we have about 50 some. It's hard work. We fought the currents, the winds, the waves. We ran north, we ran south, we got it all done.
We found enough information to warrant these areas as being habitat areas of particular concern.
And we realized that collecting this type of information is one of the first steps to try to develop conservation measures that will hopefully help protect these ecosystems in perpetuity.